Spain. Machine gun nests. The Germans had months to prepare, and they were using every single day. British intelligence ran the numbers. If the Germans were fully prepared, if they knew exactly where the invasion was coming, the estimates were brutal: 30,000 to 50,000 Allied casualties. Maybe more. Young men from Britain, America, Canada, blown apart on beaches, drowning in the surf, cut down before they even reached the shore. Winston Churchill sat in his war room, cigar smoke curling toward the ceiling, and asked the question that haunted every Allied planner. How do you hide an invasion force of 160,000 men and 3,000 ships? You can't. That's the answer. You cannot hide an armada that size. The Germans have reconnaissance planes. They have spies in every port from Gibraltar to Alexandria. They have intercepted radio traffic. They know something is coming. Churchill had a phrase for his strategy: attacking Europe's soft underbelly. Italy was supposed to be the weak point, the place where the Nazis could be hurt. But how soft is a belly when the enemy is standing there, waiting for you, with 11 divisions and all the time in the world to aim their guns? The invasion was scheduled for July. It was already early 1943. The clock was ticking. And unless someone came up with something brilliant, something absolutely insane, the beaches of Sicily were going to run red with Allied blood. This is where the spies come in, not the Hollywood kind, not James Bond sliding into a casino in a tuxedo. The real kind. The kind who sit in offices, smoke too many cigarettes, and think up ideas so crazy they just might work. Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague, Jewish barrister who traded his courtroom wig for a naval uniform when the war started. Sharp mind, meticulous. The kind of man who could argue a case for 6 hours without notes. Now he worked for naval intelligence, and his job was deception. Make the enemy believe lies. Make them act on those lies. Make them send their troops to the wrong place at the wrong time. Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley, RAF officer, upper class, creative, a little eccentric, the kind of man who'd sketch out wild plans on napkins during lunch. He worked for MI5, and he thought about the war like a chess game. How do you make your opponent move exactly where you want them? Together, they were part of something called the 20 Committee, the XX Committee, Double Cross, a team dedicated entirely to deceiving the Germans through double agents, fake intelligence, psychological warfare. If you could make Hitler believe a lie, you could change the entire war. And they had help. A lieutenant commander in naval intelligence named Ian Fleming. Yes, that Ian Fleming. The man who would later create James Bond was sitting in British intelligence during World War II, dreaming up schemes that were stranger than any spy novel. Back in 1939, Fleming had written something called the Trout Memo. Fly fishing enthusiast that he was, he compared deceiving the enemy to tricking trout with the right lure. The memo listed 54 different deception ideas, ranging from clever to completely bonkers. Idea number 28. A corpse dressed as an airman, with dispatches in his pockets, could be dropped on the coast, supposedly from a parachute that has failed. Float a body. Make it look like an accident. Fill the pockets with fake documents. Let the enemy find it. Fleming got the idea from a 1937 crime novel called The Milliner's Hat Mystery by Basil Thompson, where a corpse is used to mislead investigators. It was fiction, pulp fiction even. But Fleming no one who's going to ask where the body went. Because once you take this corpse, dress it up, and float it off the coast of Spain, that person isn't getting a proper burial under their real name. They're disappearing into a lie. Montagu brought in Sir Bernard Spilsbury, Britain's most famous pathologist. The man had testified in every major murder trial for decades. If anyone knew what a drowned body should look like, it was Spilsbury. He gave them the parameters. And then they waited. Weeks passed. Montagu and Cholmondeley checked morgues across London, waited for the right body to turn up. Every day that passed was one day closer to July, one day closer to the invasion, one day less for the deception to work. January 24th, 1943. An abandoned warehouse in King's Cross. A man is found dead. Brought to St. Pancras Hospital, but there's nothing they can do. He'd been dying for 2 days already. His name was Glinder Michael, 34 years old. Welsh, homeless. His father had killed himself when Glinder was 15. His mother died when he was 31. No siblings, no wife, no children. He'd been living on the streets of London, cold and starving in the middle of a world war. He ate bread laced with rat poison. Whether it was suicide, or whether he was just so hungry he didn't care what he was eating, no one knows. What's known is this: phosphorus from rat poison is a horrible way to die. It took 2 days. 2 days of agony in a hospital bed before his body finally gave up. Glinder Michael died invisible, forgotten, one more casualty of poverty that no one noticed and no one mourned. But Montague and Cholmondeley noticed. Perfect age, male, recent death. Cause of death, phosphorus poisoning, wouldn't show up in a cursory autopsy, especially if the body had been in seawater for days. And most importantly, no family, no one searching for him, no one who'd ask questions. The official report would later say, with the cold bureaucracy that only military documents can achieve, the only worthwhile thing he ever did, he did after his death. Think about that for a second. A human being, 34 years old. And the official position of His Majesty's government was that his life had been worthless, but his corpse might save thousands. There was no family to ask for consent, so the coroner simply lied on the death certificate. Cause of death, chemical pneumonitis. Not technically false, but not the whole truth either. And with that lie, Glinder Michael legally ceased to exist. His body was taken to Hackney Mortuary, placed in cold storage at 4 degrees Celsius. Not frozen, freezing would damage the tissues in ways a German pathologist might notice. Just cold enough to slow decomposition. The clock started ticking. 3 months, maybe 4 if they were lucky. After that, the body would decompose too much to be believable. The tissues would break down. The Germans would know something was wrong. They had their corpse. A Welsh homeless man who died eating poison meant for rats, now lying in a London morgue, waiting to become someone else entirely. Now they needed to make him a hero. And that's when the real creativity began. They had a corpse. Now they needed to make him somebody, not just anybody. They needed to create a complete human being. A man with a name, a rank, a history, a personality. A man convincing enough that when German intelligence examined every detail of his life, they'd find nothing suspicious, nothing that screamed fake. The name came first. Martin. Why Martin? Simple. It was one of the most common surnames in the Royal Marines. There were already several officers named This was perfect. Combined Ops was the division responsible for planning amphibious assaults, invasions from the sea. Of course, an officer Major Martin's life, piece by piece, forgery by forgery. What goes in Martin's pockets? Everything. Used ticket stubs from a London theatre. Dated April 12, 1943, the night before he supposedly left on his fatal journey. The show, Strike a New Note at the Prince of Wales Theatre. A real show, a real date. Spanish authorities, the coroner, everyone involved would be Catholic. And Catholics don't desecrate the bodies of fellow Catholics. The medal was insurance. It would make the Spanish less likely to conduct a thorough, invasive autopsy. They'd want to bury him quickly, with dignity, with respect for his faith. A receipt for a diamond engagement ring. £53, 10 shillings and sixpence. From a bond people write when they're emotional and not thinking about punctuation. Full of inside jokes, pet names, references to things only the two of them would understand. 2 letters, placed in Martin's pocket, folded and refolded until the creases were deep and permanent. Because that's what you do when you read a letter from the person you love over and over again. The official report later said Hester's letters achieved the thrill and pathos of war engagement with great success. A spinster who'd never known love wrote love letters that fooled the Nazis. Think about that. The pockets were full. The identity was complete. But none of that mattered if the documents in his briefcase weren't perfect. The briefcase was chained to Martin's wrist. Now here's the thing. Military couriers didn't actually do that. It wasn't standard procedure. But the British figured the Germans wouldn't know that. And chaining the briefcase made it look more important, more secret, more worth protecting. Inside the briefcase, 2 letters. Letter number 1. Vice Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten to General Dwight Eisenhower. Mountbatten was the Chief of Combined Operations. Eisenhower was Supreme Commander of Allied Forces. This letter asked Eisenhower to write the foreword for a pamphlet on combined operations. Boring, bureaucratic, completely believable. But here's why it mattered. It established why Major Martin was traveling. He was a courier, carrying this pamphlet between headquarters, delivering it to North Africa. That's why he was on the plane. That's why he had the briefcase. 2 proof copies of the actual pamphlet were included. Real documents, real paper, real printing. Because if you're going to lie, the lie has to be surrounded by truth. Letter number 2. Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye to General Sir Harold Alexander. This was the big one. This was the entire operation. Nye was Vice Chief of the Imperial General Staff. Alexander was commanding Allied forces in North Africa. This letter was written as if 2 old friends were catching up. Casual, chatty, not an official report. Just one general writing to another. And in that casual, chatty tone, the letter mentioned, Greece is the main target. Sardinia is the secondary target. Sicily? Oh, Sicily's just a cover. Story. We're making noise about Sicily to distract from the real invasions. It never explicitly said invade Greece. That would be too obvious, too neat. Instead, it let the reader draw their own conclusions. It mentioned Martin as an amphibious warfare expert being loaned until the assault is over. It made a bad joke about sardines, hoping the Germans would see it as code for Sardinia. The genius of the letter was its tone. It didn't sound like a fake. It sounded like 2 men who'd known each other for years, discussing strategy the way officers actually do. Casually, with inside jokes, with the kind of shorthand that comes from shared experience. Inside the letter, they placed a single black eyelash. Why? Because if the Spanish or Germans opened the letter, the eyelash would fall out. When the British got the documents back, they'd know whether they'd been read. Simple, effective. The movies later claimed it was Jean Leslie's eyelash. Romantic, but not true. It was just a prop. The paper, the ink, everything was tested. MI5 scientists experimented with different types of ink to find one that would remain legible after days in seawater. But not too perfect. The documents had to look like they'd been wet, smudged slightly, damaged by salt water, real. The uniform, Royal Marines officer dress uniform, complete with captain's insignia and major's acting rank tabs, perfectly tailored, worn enough to look real. The life jacket had to look like Martin tried to survive. Like he was in a plane crash and put on the life jacket before going into the water. His watch. stopped at a specific time. Because that's what happens when you drown with a watch on. Every detail, every single tiny detail, everything was ready. The corpse had an identity, a girlfriend, debts, dreams, a uniform, documents that could change the course of the war. Glyndwr Michael, homeless man, forgotten, died eating rat poison, was now Major William Martin, Royal Marines, engaged to be married, carrying the secrets that would save thousands of lives. Now came the terrifying part, actually putting him in the water. And hoping to God the Spanish took the bait. April 17, 1943. Holy Loch, Scotland. Cold, gray water lapping against the dock. A submarine waiting. HMS Seraph, S-class submarine. One of Britain's workhorses, small, fast, deadly. And today, it was about to carry the strangest cargo of the entire war. Lieutenant Norman Jewell commanded the Seraph. I am 30 years old, experienced, reliable. But even he didn't know the full story. He'd been told only what he needed to know. You're carrying a secret container to the coast of Spain. You're going to put something in the water. You don't ask questions. You don't tell your crew. You follow orders. The container arrived at dawn. Special steel canister, about 6 feet long, heavy, filled with dry ice. Inside, Glyndwr Michael's body, dressed as Major William Martin, complete with uniform, briefcase, pocket litter, everything. The dry ice kept him cool enough to stay preserved during the journey, but not frozen. Freezing would be catastrophic. When a frozen body thaws, the tissue damage is obvious. A German pathologist would spot it immediately. The body needed to be cold, but not frozen. The temperature had to be perfect. The canister was labeled optical instruments. The crew was told it contained meteorological equipment, secret weather monitoring devices, classified. Don't ask questions. Only Jewell and his officers knew what was really inside. When the container was loaded onto the submarine, the entire crew was sent below deck. No one saw it come aboard except the men who absolutely had to know. Then the Seraph slipped beneath the surface and headed south. The journey took 13 days. 13 days through some of the most dangerous waters in the world. The Mediterranean was crawling with German U-boats. Axis aircraft patrolled the skies. One wrong move, one detection, and the Seraph would be at the bottom of the ocean, along with Operation Mincemeat, along with any hope of reducing casualties in Sicily. Back in London, Montague and Cholmondeley could do nothing but wait. They'd planned everything they could plan. They'd thought of every detail, forged every document, created every piece of pocket litter. And now it was out of their hands. The body was on a submarine somewhere between Scotland and Spain, and all they could do was sit in their offices, smoke cigarettes, and pray the Seraph made it. Winston Churchill had been personally briefed on the operation. The Prime Minister loved it. The sheer audacity of it appealed to everything Churchill believed about warfare. That creativity and boldness could change the course of history. That sometimes the craziest ideas were the ones that worked. Churchill's comment, delivered with characteristic dark humor. If it doesn't work, we'll have to get the body back and give it another swim. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one who had to make it work. air. Inside, the body of Glyndŵr Michael, dressed in the full uniform of Major William Martin, Royal Marines. Briefcase chained to his wrist, life jacket secured, every detail perfect. Montague had written in his notes after seeing the body prepared, "This man's face was peaceful." Maybe it was. Maybe in death, Glyndŵr Michael finally found some kind of rest that had eluded him in his 34 years of life. Or maybe it was just the stillness that comes to all corpses, and Montague needed to see peace there. Lieutenant Jules stood on the deck. He didn't know the full story, didn't know this was a homeless man, didn't know about the girlfriend who didn't exist, didn't know about the love letters written by a spinster who'd never been in love. But he knew this moment mattered. He knew this strange mission, this bizarre operation, was important enough that Churchill himself had signed off on it. Jules opened his Bible, read Psalm 39 aloud into the darkness. "Lord, let me know my end, and what is the measure of my days. Let me know how fleeting my life is." Then they lowered the body into the water. Glyndŵr Michael, now Major William Martin, slipped into the black Mediterranean. The life jacket kept him afloat, face up, exactly as a drowned man would drift. The briefcase, chained to his wrist, bounced gently beside him in the water. The submarine's engines reversed. The wash from the propellers pushed the body toward the Spanish coast, toward Huelva, toward Adolf Klaus and the German intelligence network, and, if everything worked, toward Adolf Hitler's desk in Berlin. They watched him drift away in the darkness, a corpse in a British uniform, carrying lies that could save thousands of lives, floating toward an enemy's shore. Then the Seraph submerged and headed for the canister drop site, 12 miles out to sea. The canister had to be destroyed, couldn't risk anyone finding it, figuring out what it had carried. They tried to sink it, riddled it with machine gun fire. Dozens of rounds punched through the steel. But the canister wouldn't sink. Air trapped in the insulation kept it afloat, bobbing mockingly on the surface. Finally, they used plastic explosives, blew it apart, watched the pieces sink into the deep water where no one would ever find them. A signal was sent back to London. 3 words: mincemeat completed. The Seraph continued to Gibraltar. Mission accomplished. Now there was nothing to do but wait and hope the Spanish found what they were supposed to find. 9:30 a.m., the same morning, April 30, 1943, José Antonio Rey Maria was fishing for sardines off the coast of Huelva when he saw something in the water. Something large. Something that didn't belong. A body. Floating face up. British uniform, Royal Marines officer. Rey Maria pulled the body aboard his fishing boat. Saw the briefcase chained to the wrist, saw the life jacket. Knew immediately this was something important, something he needed to report. He sailed to shore and notified Spanish soldiers. Within an hour, the body was in the hands of the Huelva naval judge. And the operation entered its most critical phase. Francis Hazelden, the British vice consul, arrived immediately. This was his part of the plan. He demanded the body and documents be returned to British custody right away. He acted urgent, concerned, worried about sensitive materials. He made it clear that whatever was in that briefcase was important, classified, needed to be kept secret. It was perfect. Because the more Hazelden insisted the documents were sensitive, the more curious the Spanish became, the more they wanted to know what was inside. Pro-Nazi Spanish officers swarmed over everything. They carefully removed the briefcase, took it to a back room, steamed open the letters, delicate work, trying not to damage the paper, now buried with military honors under a false name in a country that wasn't his own. A man whose own country had declared his life worthless was now being honored as a hero by the enemy. The Spanish fired a salute, said prayers, lowered him into the ground. Major Martin was buried with honors. But the documents? Those were on their way to Berlin, to Adolf Hitler's desk. And what happened next would change the entire war. The documents left Huelva, started traveling up the chain of command, and every single person who touched them believed they were real. Spanish authorities in Huelva sent photocopies to the German embassy in Madrid. The German embassy sent them to Abwehr headquarters in Berlin, German military intelligence. The Abwehr sent them to Hitler's military intelligence staff. The documents passed through multiple sets of hands, multiple levels of scrutiny, multiple opportunities for someone to say, "Wait, something's wrong here." Nobody did. Every link in the chain believed it. The Spanish believed it. The German agents in Madrid believed it. The intelligence analysts in Berlin believed it. The documents looked real. The story made sense. A British officer dies in a plane crash, washes ashore, carrying classified invasion plans. Tragic, but these things happen in war. Back in London, Montague and Cholmondeley could barely breathe. May 3rd, the documents were returned to British custody. The WWII Spanish gave them back with apologies and condolences. "So sorry about your officer. Here are his effects." Proper military courtesy between nations, even in wartime. Montague immediately took them to the forensics lab, examined them under magnification, checked the envelope seal. And there it was, or rather, there it wasn't. The eyelash. Gone. They'd been read. The Spanish had opened the letters, which meant the Germans had almost certainly seen them. But that wasn't enough. Or both at once. It was working. The Germans believed the documents. They believed Major Martin was real. They believed the invasion plans were genuine. And they were acting on them, moving entire divisions away from the actual target and toward the fake ones. Hitler had taken the bait. May 14, 1943. Berchtesgaden, Hitler's mountain retreat in the Bavarian Alps. Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz arrived for a meeting. Dönitz commanded the German Navy, the Kriegsmarine. He'd just come from a meeting with Mussolini in Italy, and he had intelligence to share with the Führer. Documents recovered from a dead British officer found off the coast of Spain. The Spanish had photographed everything before returning them to the British, and German intelligence had obtained the photographs. Dönitz spread them out in front of Hitler. Letters from British High Command, one from Vice Admiral Mountbatten to General Eisenhower, another from Lieutenant General Nye to General Alexander, discussing Allied invasion plans. The letters indicated that Greece was the main target, Sardinia was the secondary target, and Sicily? Sicily was mentioned only as a cover story, a feint, a deception to draw German attention away from the real invasions. Hitler studied the documents, read them carefully, and he believed every single word. Why? Because it made perfect sense. Greece was strategically critical. The Balkans protected the Romanian oil fields. Germany's entire war machine ran on Romanian oil. Lose Romania, lose the war. Of course, the Allies would invade Greece to threaten those supply lines. Sardinia made sense too. It was closer to southern France than Sicily was, a logical stepping stone for an invasion of the French coast. The Allies could use Sardinia as a base to strike at the soft underbelly of occupied Europe. And Sicily? Sicily was too obvious. Every German general had been saying for months that Sicily was the logical next target, which meant it was too obvious to be real. The British had to know the Germans expected Sicily. So obviously, Sicily was the cover story. The deception, the lie designed to hide the truth. Hitler's genius was his undoing. He was too smart, too strategic. He outthought himself right into the trap. He ordered immediate redeployment. The movements were staggering. German forces on Sardinia were doubled. 10,000 troops rushed to the island. Coastal defenses strengthened, artillery positioned, minefields laid. An entire panzer division, tanks, armored vehicles, thousands of men, moved from France to Greece. German torpedo boats were pulled from Sicily, sent to the Greek islands. E-boats repositioned to protect the Aegean. Multiple divisions transferred to the Balkans. A communication headquarters was established in Tripoli to coordinate the defense of Greece. Reinforcements sent to the Peloponnese. Sicily, meanwhile, was stripped down. Forces reduced. Key units transferred elsewhere. The island that had been a fortress in March was now defended by a skeleton crew in June. All because of a dead homeless man and a briefcase full of lies. The German High Command was so convinced that they even warned their Italian allies, told Mussolini to expect invasions in Greece and Sardinia, advised him to reinforce those positions, leave Sicily with minimal defense since it was just a British deception target. Mussolini, already nervous about the Allied advance, believed them too. The entire Axis defense strategy in the Mediterranean had been rewritten, all because Hitler believed Major William Martin was real. Churchill was in Washington, D.C., meeting with Roosevelt, planning the next stages of the war, coordinating with American military leadership. A telegram arrived from Brigadier Leslie Hollis in London, marked urgent, classified at the highest level. Churchill opened it, read the message, and a smile spread across his face, that famous Churchill smile, the one that meant he'd just won something. The telegram read, "Mincemeat swallowed rod, line and sinker by right people, and from best information, they look like acting on it." Mincemeat swallowed. Rod, line, and sinker. A fishing metaphor for the Prime Minister who loved naval warfare and clever schemes and the kind of audacious operations that would make good stories after the war was won. The right people had swallowed it. Hitler, Dönitz, the German High Command. They'd taken the bait completely. And from the intercepted communications, from the ultra-decrypts, from every piece of intelligence British agents could gather, they were acting on it. Moving forces, redeploying divisions, weakening Sicily. Churchill loved it. The old spy lover, the man who'd cut his teeth on adventures and intrigue, and the romance of espionage, loved every bit of it. A dead body, fake documents, a fictional girlfriend, and Adolf Hitler completely fooled. Back in London, the people who'd actually pulled it off were celebrating. Quietly, Montague sat in his office at Naval Intelligence, allowed himself one whiskey, maybe two. Cholmondeley was somewhere in MI5, probably doing the same. The Beavers, those 14 women in Section 17M who'd forged the receipts, created the pocket litter, built Major Martin's entire life piece by piece. They couldn't tell anyone what they'd done, couldn't explain why they were smiling at their desks, couldn't share the greatest professional triumph of their lives with anyone outside the operation. Jean Leslie went about her regular duties, filing reports, taking dictation, looking beautiful and professional, and giving no indication that her photograph in a swimsuit was currently in a grave in Spain, tucked into the pocket of a corpse dressed as a major. Hester, Leggett, stern and unmarried, and called the Spin by her colleagues, sat at her desk and wrote more memos in her precise handwriting. Nobody knew she'd written love letters so convincing they'd fooled the Nazis. Nobody would know for decades. But they all knew. It worked. The deception had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes. Hitler believed. The Germans were moving forces away from Sicily. The invasion would face weaker defenses, fewer casualties, more lives saved. But now came the real test. D-Day for Sicily was scheduled for July 9th, 10th, 1943. Operation Husky, 160,000 Allied troops, 3,000 ships, 4,000 aircraft, the largest amphibious invasion in history up to that point. Would Operation Mincemeat actually matter? Would the deception translate into real military advantage? Would British, American, and Canadian boys actually survive because of a homeless man's corpse and a briefcase full of lies? Or would the beaches of Sicily be just as deadly as feared? Would thousands still die? Would this entire wild gamble, the forgeries, the corpse, the submarine journey, the funeral in Spain, would all of it be for nothing? The pieces were in motion. Hitler had taken the bait. But the real test was coming. When 160,000 Allied troops hit the beaches of Sicily, would Operation Mincemeat actually save lives? Or had this entire wild gamble been for nothing? July 9th, 10th, 1943. Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily. The numbers were staggering. 160,000 Allied troops, 3,000 ships, 4,000 aircraft. The British would land in the southeast, around Avola. The Americans would hit the beaches in the southwest, near Gela. It was the largest amphibious invasion in history up to that point, bigger than anything attempted before. A rehearsal for what would eventually become D-Day in Normandy. The Allied commanders knew what they were facing, or thought they did. 11 divisions defending Sicily, 9 Italian divisions along the coasts, 2 full German divisions ready to counterattack, coastal batteries, machine gun nests, minefields, artillery positioned on every hill overlooking every beach. The projections were brutal. 30,000 to 50,000 Allied casualties, maybe more. A 90-day campaign to take the island. Brutal urban fighting, house to house, street to street. Body bags coming home by the thousands. That's what they expected. That's not what they found. The invasion began before dawn. Naval bombardment lit up the sky. Paratroopers dropped inland. Landing craft hit the beaches. And the Allied troops discovered something shocking. The defenses were weak. German forces were severely depleted. Entire divisions were missing. The intelligence reports had said 2 German divisions would be waiting, but they weren't there. They were in Greece, repositioned because Hitler believed Greece was the real target and Sicily was just a feint. The Italian coastal militia was poorly trained and even more poorly motivated. They didn't want to fight. Many of them surrendered immediately. Some abandoned their positions before the Allies even reached them. The Italian soldiers knew the war was already lost. Why die for Mussolini when the Americans were coming with overwhelming force? The resistance was a fraction of what they'd anticipated. Beaches that should have been killing fields turned into secure landing zones within hours. Ships that should have been sunk by coastal artillery unloaded their troops without major losses. And here's the most incredible part. Even 4 hours after the invasion began, the Germans still believed Sicily was a diversion. British codebreakers at Bletchley Park intercepted German signals. 4 hours into Operation Husky, with Allied troops already inland, with ships filling the harbors, with aircraft dominating the skies, 21 Axis aircraft left Sicily for Sardinia. They still thought Sardinia was the real target. They still believed the documents from Major Martin's briefcase. Even with overwhelming evidence right in front of them, Hitler's orders held. Defend Greece, defend Sardinia. Sicily is just a feint. The island fell in 38 days. Not 90, 38. Allied casualties were a fraction of what had been projected. Ship losses were minimal. The campaign that was supposed to be a brutal, grinding nightmare turned into a stunning victory. How many lives did Operation Mincemeat save? Impossible to say exactly. Thousands, certainly. British soldiers who would have died on the beaches went home. American boys who would have been cut down by machine gun fire survived to write letters to their families. Canadian troops who would have drowned in the surf made it to shore and kept fighting. Thousands of lives, saved by a homeless man's corpse and a briefcase full of lies. The operation remained classified. For years, no one outside a small circle knew what had happened. The public heard about the invasion of Sicily. They heard about the victory. But Operation Mincemeat stayed secret. In 1944, Montagu was made an officer of the Order of the British Empire. In 1948, Cholmondeley was made a member of the Order of the British Empire, awards for service to the Crown. But the citations were vague. Nothing about corpses or deception or fooling Hitler. Jean Leslie? Nothing. She went back to her regular work, filing, typing, being an 18-year-old clerk in a government office, knowing she'd helped change the course of the war and unable to tell anyone. Hester Leggett? Nothing. The stern spinster who'd written love letters so convincing they fooled Nazi intelligence returned to her duties. Still called the Spin by her colleagues. Still unmarried, still unknown. The Beavers? The 14 women of Section 17M who'd forged every receipt, created every piece of pocket litter, built Major Martin's entire identity detail by detail. Forgotten. Their names weren't in any reports. Their contributions weren't acknowledged. History was written by men, about men, and the women who'd made it possible disappeared into the margins. In 1953, Montagu published a book, The Man Who Never Was. It became a bestseller. The story was extraordinary. How British intelligence had used a corpse to deceive Hitler. But Montagu kept many details secret. The identity of the corpse was described only as a bit of a ne'er-do-well. The identity of Pam, The girlfriend in the photograph wasn't revealed. Jean Leslie's name never appeared. In 1956, they made a film, same title, starred Gloria Graham as a fictionalized version of the girlfriend, added a completely made-up subplot about German spies in London trying to uncover the deception. It was entertaining. It was successful. It was mostly fiction. And the truth? The truth stayed buried. Glyndŵr Michael lay in his grave in Huelva, Spain, under the name William Martin for 54 years. 54 years before anyone publicly acknowledged who he really was. Jean Leslie's role remained unknown for 53 years. Hester Leggett died in 1995, largely forgotten. No obituary mentioned her love letters. No one remembered that she'd helped save thousands of lives. An amateur historian named Roger Morgan was searching through documents at the Public Record Office in London. Newly declassified files from World War II. He was looking for details about intelligence operations. He found a document, a name, Glyndŵr Michael, the identity of the corpse, finally confirmed. After 53 years, the truth was in the public record. In 1997, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission added a new inscription to the grave in Huelva. Below the original marker that read, William Martin, they added, Glyndŵr Michael served as Major William Martin, RM. His real name. Finally acknowledged, finally visible. The homeless man who died eating rat poison was finally recognized for what he'd done, even if he'd had no choice in doing it. Also in 1996, Jean Leslie's story emerged. A local council officer, piecing together clues from the newly released documents, deduced her connection to Operation Mincemeat. The photograph. The girlfriend is named Pam. He approached Jean Leslie, now in her 70s. She confirmed it, publicly, for the first time. She'd been Pam. Her photograph had been in Major Martin's pocket when he washed ashore in Spain. She'd never been allowed to talk about it. But now, finally, she could. The press loved it. The beautiful young woman who'd unknowingly helped fool Hitler. Jean handled the attention with grace and dignity. She'd lived a full life. Married Colonel William Gerard Lee in 1946. Raised 4 children, done extensive charity work, kept a beautiful garden. But she'd never forgotten Operation Mincemeat. Never forgotten that her face had been part of something extraordinary. In 2010, historian Ben McIntyre published a comprehensive book, Operation Mincemeat, the true spy story that changed the course of World War II. He'd done exhaustive research, interviewed survivors, dug through archives, and for the first time, the full story was told, including Hester Leggett's role, the spinster who'd written love letters, the beavers who'd created the pocket litter, the women who'd been erased from history finally got their names back. Jean Leslie died in 2012 at the age of 88. She'd lived long enough to see her contribution recognized, long enough to know that history would remember her. In 2021 and 2022, Operation Mincemeat got renewed attention. A new film starring Colin Firth and Kelly MacDonald, a Broadway musical. 79 years after the operation, the story was finally getting the full recognition it deserved. What did Operation Mincemeat prove? That sometimes the craziest ideas work. That sometimes a lie saves more lives than the truth. That sometimes a homeless man matters more dead than he ever did alive. Think about the paradox of Glyndŵr Michael. Invisible in life. His father killed himself when Glyndŵr was 15. His mother died when he was 31. He ended up homeless, starving, alone in London during a world war. He ate bread laced with rat poison and died in agony over 2 days at St. Pancras Hospital. The official British government report said, with brutal honesty, that the only worthwhile thing he ever did, he did after his death. That's a horrible thing to say about a human being. But it's also true. That worthwhile thing, being dressed as Major Martin, floating off the coast of Spain, fooling Adolf Hitler, saved thousands of lives, changed the course of World War II, made Glinder Michael immortal in a way his tragic life never could have. And think about the women. Jean Leslie, 18 years old, beautiful, giving her photograph without fully understanding how it would be used. Hester Leggett, the stern spinster who'd never been in love, somehow writing love letters so passionate and believable, they convinced Nazi intelligence officers. The Beavers, those 14 women who forged every receipt, every ticket stub, every detail of Major Martin's existence. They were forgotten for decades. History was written by men, about men. The women who made it possible disappeared into footnotes or vanished entirely. The legacy of Operation Mincemeat extends far beyond World War II. It became one of the most successful deceptions in military history. It's studied at every intelligence agency worldwide: the CIA, MI6, Mossad. They all teach Operation Mincemeat as a template for psychological warfare, for understanding how human psychology works, how confirmation bias makes people believe what they want to believe, how a well-crafted lie told with enough detail and conviction can become more believable than the truth. But it also raises questions, uncomfortable questions. Was it ethical to use Glinder Michael's body without his consent? He couldn't say yes. He was dead. No family to ask permission from. Just a coroner who lied on a death certificate and a government that decided his corpse was more valuable than his dignity. Was the lie justified by the lives it saved? If Operation Mincemeat saved thousands of soldiers, does that make it right? Does the math work out? One dead homeless man's body in exchange for thousands of young men who got to go home to their families? Is there dignity in death if there was none in life? Glinder Michael died invisible, forgotten, worthless in the eyes of the world. But as Major William Martin, he was buried with full military honors. He has a grave that thousands of people visit. He's remembered. Is that dignity? Or is it just another use of his body for purposes he never chose? Maybe there's no clean answer. Maybe it's both. Maybe Glinder Michael was exploited and honored at the same time. Used